It's funny. I was thinking about you because it's funny. Like when I got in touch with you, I only noticed after I had reached out to you that on my bookshelf, like I have literally right next to my desk, I have like my toys, and then I have a few books that I keep that are kind of like relevant, and I have Disney Imagineering and then the Art of Blizzard, right, or like side by side, like all the way. So I think it's like perfectly sums up not all your career, but a nice chunk of it.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of jump in, like to talk about your career and how'd you get started? Like where'd you kind of start off? And did you go to school or did you kind of self taught?
I did go to school, but I'm also very self-taught. So, I don't know if you've heard of it. I went to BYU. I got my
Okay,
degree in animation. Um, but like a lot of my experience there, like eh, I feel like I was really fortunate because they made a lot of tools available to us.
mm,
Um, but so far as the people that were there that could teach me what I wanted to learn, there wasn't anybody.
mm-hmm.
The stuff that I do now, there wasn't anybody teaching that stuff, and there were some people who knew kind of some basic introductory, here's how you extrude a face, and here's how you
Yeah.
merge a couple verts together. But
Was it
um,
2D animation or 3D animation? The
both,
focus. Uh
both. So I learned paper flip book animation. In fact, I've got my
oh, cool.
pegboards and my I've got actually like a Disney light table
Oh, nice.
animation disc over here somewhere too. But um, really fun. So yeah, I learned how to do the flip book animation. I learned how to do animation in Flash, which doesn't exist anymore. Um,
Rip.
yeah, rip hard. Um, So yeah, I did that, and then I also learned how to do a little bit of animation inside of like Maya and things like that. So it was fun.
Cool.
But most of my focus while I was there was in 3D animation, or trying to get into like 3D modeling. So a lot of what I did was like I would like scrounge online for any pictures of wireframes just to be able
Mm,
to study from because I
interesting.
and then I
Back that
like
was before YouTube.
back before, yeah, well, yeah, before YouTube was a thing and had like all the
Yeah.
free all that free content that people put
Right.
out. Hashtag love YouTube. Woo! um but it's like
Wow.
it was crazy. And then I
Was
would
that
like
your
reach out to
was that your initial interest was animation, or you just kind of did that because that was the opportunity that you had?
I did that because that was the kind of like the world I wanted to be in, right? That
Okay.
was the industry I wanted to go into. Um, at first, I was very not interested in games at all,
Hmm.
um, which is funny because now I'm working in games. Um, but it was just one of those things where I loved stylized character art and
Yeah.
things like that. And like in high school, I was fortunate enough to have a 3D animation class offered that a buddy invited me to. He works at DreamWorks now, which is fun because
That's
I've worked with
awesome.
him before.
That's cool.
um, but it was just a really neat experience to be able to take that class. I fell in love with it, fell in love with 3D animation, and decided to pursue it.
Nice.
Um, so
That's
yeah,
awesome. So yeah, so I just wanted to say like your one thing I really enjoy about your style is that you really push the proportions to the limit. Like I feel like you have a really you go super stylized, but it works really nicely, and like you do it, and obviously you're a pro, and so but it looks really good, and it's interesting because I think a lot of people when they're doing stylized work try to keep it like a little safe, like they want it to be stylized, but they don't want to go too far. But like I've noticed with your work, you really push the limits on like on the proportions and kind of those things. How did you kind of develop that style?
a lot of experimentation. I mean, there are definitely artists that I follow that I super love. In fact, I've got like certain names. Like I keep a running list of like people that super inspire me. But it's like I definitely try. When I was first starting off trying to get into this sort of stuff, I would find people's artwork that I loved,
Hmm.
and I would ask their permission to be able to use their concept, and I would translate it into 3D.
Hmm.
And that was a lot of fun, and that was a really great exercise for me to be able to learn from exactly what these designers did. I've always loved people like J. Scott Campbell,
Yeah.
Ivana Kisa, really great. Celeste Yamanek, she's awesome. Um, Hichama Hachi. I actually don't know how to pronounce his last name. He's like amazing. He's like one of those. He's art director on Rivals. It's super cool.
Oh, nice.
Lots of really cool people. But I would try to find, Chris. Chris. Oh my goodness, why am I blanking on his name now? Sanders.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I love
Yeah.
Chris Sanders. I love his style and his sensibilities, the way that he's able to push like the thicks and thins.
Yeah.
And like you're talking about proportions, big eyes. Big eyes is something I've been exploring a lot and experimenting with a lot lately. But by experimenting and exploring kind of what other artists have done, I've been able to kind of, I guess, build a library or even just build my own sensibilities, figure out what it is that I like, figure out how to do it, things like that, and then I got to start experimenting with things like that beyond there. So really,
That's really
just
cool.
a lot of fun. It's just a lot of fun.
There's a lot of
pushing
trial
the
and
ball.
error, and
A lot of trial and error.
yeah, that's awesome. Because you definitely have like a very unique style, which I think is I've been having this conversation a lot with people over the last few days, and we're talking about how a lot of people kind of follow the groove of like what other people are doing, but it's really cool when you see people who are pushing the limits and pushing the boundaries and trying new things, because that's where innovation really happens. So I'm curious to hear. So how'd you get from like animation school to, I guess, ultimately to games? But you had a few stops along the way, correct?
Yeah. So my journey's been like no crystal stair, as it were, right? I've kind of gone all over the place, right? It's I started out when I got out of school. I mean, my expectation when I went to school was that doors would just open for me. I mean, that's kind of the expectation you're raised with, right?
Right.
So I went to school. I got out and graduated, did all the things. I got my little piece of paper, felt fancy. But my first job out in the industry was not something that I wanted or something that I trained for. I started doing storyboarding. I started doing a little bit of concept design, but it wasn't like, it wasn't high end stuff. It was for a small studio. It was for religious videos and things like that. Yeah, it's not something that goes out
Wasn't the dream
necessarily. Yeah, it wasn't the dream. It's not a AAA
Yeah.
studio. It's not a
Yeah.
big blockbuster film. It's not anything like that. It wasn't the aim, but it was
Yeah.
it was a step along the way, right? So I did a lot of that, motion graphics. I did whiteboard animation, and then after a while, I got an opportunity to come down to LA to do some prototype sculpting in ZBrush, which is my first 3D job, which was
Wow.
awesome.
Wow.
But this prototyping is for fine art, so much more refined, more realistic, more anatomical, and then it was geared toward 3D printing. So it was also my first real dip into
Interesting.
3D printing. Really cool. It was not my favorite experience.
What year was this? Like how long was this?
This is 2014, so this is like
Okay.
11 years. I think
So
2014.
it's kind of the
Sounds
early
right.
days of like 3D printing starting to break into the mainstream scene a little
Yeah,
bit.
starting to become much more commercially available.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a fun experience from that standpoint. I got to learn a ton. I had a really good buddy there that we got to work together. Hugh, he was amazing. Learned a lot from him, and that was where I started to really kind of pick up on ZBrush. But that job, yeah, it was just a tricky environment. We were working in the factory. It was a really interesting,
interesting.
really interesting altogether.
Yeah.
And then I went back into this film project that was supposed to be about Jacob Marley from Christmas Carol.
Okay.
I started teaching as my first teaching job, like 2015, something like that.
But you were still early on in your career at that point.
Yeah, still very early on in my career. I'd been graduated for 5 years, 4 years, something like that.
What were you teaching? Animation or like 3D?
A whole bunch of stuff. I taught figure drawing. I taught Intro to ZBrush, Intro to Maya. I taught Advanced ZBrush and Advanced Maya. Um, I taught character design, prop design, storyboarding. There were like so many things that I was teaching, and it was a small university.
Hmm.
It was an accredited university, but it was a small university. It doesn't exist anymore. But it's when you have an entertainment school in the middle of Salt Lake City, you wonder how
Yeah.
long it's going to last anyway. But
Right.
niche
Yeah.
things, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but it was cool. I mean, it was I started so I started teaching, and that was great. I feel like that's where I was able to take where my skills were, and I saw like really rapid improvement in my own skills during
Hmm.
that time,
Hmm.
and that was phenomenal. That
Yeah.
was really
Yeah.
really cool to me. I mean,
Yeah.
it's cool to see the students progress, but I mean, it's pretty cool to progress yourself too, right?
Yeah, there's like a saying. It's about hey, I learned a lot from my teachers. I learned a lot from my friends. I learned more from my teachers, but I learned the most from my students. And this idea that, like, when you teach other people, that really is what pushes you to learn things. That because I think when you're teaching other people, they ask you questions and they make you think of things that you wouldn't have otherwise necessarily thought of. And it kind of pushes you to explore, and first of all, it challenges you to kind of make sure you really know what you're talking about, and then
Hmm.
also to kind of view it from fresh eyes and fresh angles, and to approach it from ways that you never would have otherwise. So that's
Yeah.
that's really cool.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, it's one of the hard things too is that you've got to be staying on top of the software too. In
Right,
order to teach
right.
stuff to people. I mean, at that point, um, I wasn't like an industry professional like with super heavy experience. People
Yeah,
wouldn't look at me and be like, "Oh, he's working
right,
at Blizzard." Like, "Ooh, whoa."
right,
I wasn't doing anything, right? It was it
right.
was my teaching, and then I was working on this little small film on the side.
Yeah.
Um, but I was able to build a really good camaraderie with these students who most of them were my age. Some of them were a lot
Hmm.
older than I was.
Yeah.
Um, and it was a really interesting experience.
Yeah.
But it was while I was teaching there that I was presented with the opportunity to go and work at Warner Brothers Avalanche, where I worked on
Cool.
Hogwarts Legacy. So that was where my first like real actual break was.
Yeah. First AAA game.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
How was that experience? Like, kind of progressing and moving into the AAA game space.
It was interesting. I mean, it was definitely so far as working on the game goes, really good experience.
Hmm.
I
What kind
loved
of stuff
being
were you
able.
doing? Are you doing characters? Are you doing
Yeah, characters
nice,
and creatures. So like
nice,
the moon calf that's in the game, that's my handiwork.
nice?
A lot of the clothing that you see around in the game, like different shirts, hats. I think I did probably like 70% of the hats.
Wow, nice.
um,
You do
I
the
did.
sorting hat?
I didn't do the sorting hat.
All right, listen. We'll
Was there
take the
even a
70% of the other
Yeah,
hats.
yeah. Yeah, all the caps and all the yeah, it
Oh,
was it
very
was a
cool.
blast. Um, yeah, it's different student clothing that you see. Like the female students uh outfit from the beginning of the game.
Hmm.
I mean, I didn't do the whole outfit, but I did do her stockings and her so like her legs and
Uh
her
huh.
feet.
Oh,
So
nice.
so like her
I have to,
shoes
I
that
have to
she's
go back
wearing
and like
there.
look at them.
Yeah, the shoes were amazing. I loved how those shoes turned out because essentially the art director came to me and said, "Hey, I've got a challenge for you. I want you to make these shoes," and he showed
Hmm.
me an exact pair of shoes. And so I went ahead and whipped those out, and he really liked
Nice.
them, and it was fun. So
That's awesome. Yeah,
yeah,
so like your first foray into AAA games, what was that like? Kind of coming from you already had a bit of experience under your belt at that point, but this was kind of the big leagues at this point. So what was that transition like?
a little bit. It's so far as my experience at that studio, it was not good.
Hmm.
So I don't want to get too deep into the weeds in that.
Hmm.
Um, but so far as being able to like the feeling of relief and accomplishment and
Yeah,
being
for
able to
sure.
get into that first role, that was huge.
Yeah.
I mean, it turned out like I was actually in a car accident partway through that, and so I had to do a lot of physical therapy.
Oh wow.
Um, and it made it really hard to keep up with my tasks. I did
Yeah.
what I could, and I was there as a junior artist, and I was doing everything that I could to
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
keep up and do everything that I was asked of me, and eventually I was terminated. It was
Hmm.
a really hard experience. I don't know exactly why I was terminated. It's not a I should not have been terminated.
Hmm.
Um, but like I said, there are other things happening at that studio I don't want to
Yeah.
get into.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why we could.
Um, but right as I was wrapping up there, I got my offer to go work at DreamWorks. So
Mhm.
like every once in a while, one door shuts, but
Right.
another door can open,
Right.
and sometimes it takes more patience. But that
For
time I was
sure.
fortunate enough that we had
Yeah.
something good to roll on to.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So let me just kind of, without focusing too much on that specific thing, but just as a more general question of how do you in general, when you're faced with challenges and and different kind of setbacks like that, how do you kind of get through it and come out on the other side stronger and and grow from it?
That's a really good question. So, I mean, it kind of depends on the challenge because a lot of times, especially in this industry, the biggest challenge that people will face is lack of employment or like kind of trying to
Right.
find the next job, um, or even sometimes burnout. Like those are like the two main things.
Right.
Um, there could be like toxic work environments, which is like an absolute pain and a nightmare to work with or work through or live through. Um, for I guess I could break down like for if I'm going through and waiting for that next job, it's really hard emotionally to live through those sorts of experiences of like I don't know when my next paycheck is going to be coming in because I don't
Right.
have any source of income. Um, but those are times where I dig the most into personal betterment, where
Yeah.
I find art exercises to do. I pick a new project. I push my portfolio. I do a ton of networking.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love talking to people and I love trying to
Yeah.
connect and get advice and even just encouragement. I feel like artists in this industry, for the most part, are insanely encouraging, very
Yeah.
supportive. Um, not always available, but definitely always. We root for each other because we know
Yeah.
how hard it is.
Yeah. I was having this conversation with somebody, last week I think it was, and you're talking about how like it's funny that it's so surprising, but it's a little surprising like how nice and helpful everyone is to each other in the industry. Especially because I think you kind of like when you're outside the industry and you hear about Hollywood and you hear about movies and et cetera, like there's this kind of stigma of like everyone's like it's cutthroat and everyone hates each other and all these things. And but then once you get in and you start like meeting the people, and especially the artists, the people who are kind of behind the scenes, everyone's so willing to help. Everyone's so nice. I've only had positive experiences in my time, and it's a really nice feeling when like you realize like everyone kind of wants everyone else to succeed. And I don't know if it's
Mhm.
always been like that or if that's kind of more recent with, kind of social media and kind of things being more online. I really, I haven't been around long enough to know, but that's kind of been, from what I've seen in the few years I've been doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun. I definitely super enjoy that side of things. So, surrounding yourself with the community is very helpful when you're trying to go through these challenges. Um, I mean, I think that like uh, toxic workplace environments, you got to learn how to stick up for yourself. Know that it's okay. Like it might be personal, but you don't have to take it personally. You do
Right.
have to stand up for your person. Like
Right. Right.
and and the more that you stand for yourself and the more that you stand for others, the stronger people view you as an individual. And I think that that's just part of the morality of being human, right? Like
Right.
you gotta be a good person, or else people
Right.
are not going to want to be
Right.
around you.
Right. No, for
Um,
sure. Absolutely.
it's a big, big thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the oh gosh, what was the other one? I can't even remember what the other thing. There were like three things that I anyway. What it doesn't
That's all
matter.
good. It's all good. So moving along. What are some kind of things that you've gone through in terms of projects that have kind of pushed you out of your comfort zone and kind of, challenged you in a way that was, that kind of was maybe different than what you were used to, but kind of helped you, ultimately grow?
That's a good question. I mean, because I've had all sorts of projects, and each one's pushed me differently. Um, right, like during the summer um, after I'd wrapped up on at DreamWorks, before I started working at Imagineering, I actually did like 3D models of furniture for Crate and Barrel.
Interesting.
Um,
For
and that
what was it,
was
like, for commercials or for their website? Like, what was that?
so it's for like an AR app where you could like go through and you could like
Uh,
envision the furniture in your space.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and I hated that gig so much. It was so boring.
yeah.
But the thing that
Not
was
like,
super cool about it was that it was such a structured modeling
mm,
um like the style of modeling was so structured. It was so
yeah,
exact. It was so measured, and like everything was had to be precise and exact, and it was quite it was crazy. It was a crazy little job. Um, so in that regard, it taught me to be more measured with my efforts and how I go about and put things out there, how I go about creating things for the pipeline. Um, so yeah, it was a good experience from that standpoint. Just not very
interesting.
exciting,
Right,
and
right,
definitely not something I'd ever put in my portfolio. But
right. As I say, it's not quite as exciting as characters.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, very cool, very cool. So I really do want to talk to you because this is something that, like, is kind of one of my, like, favorite things is the Imagineering side of your career. Because Disney Imagineering for me is kind of like the dream, like, it's, to me, I love theme park design. That's, like, kind of, to me, the coolest aspect of the design industry. I love the immersiveness and the kind of larger than life aspect to it. Can you kind of talk about your time at Imagineering?
So cool. That was a really good experience. So my core team was focused on the Disney Tokyo Park,
Okay.
and that was a phenomenal group. I loved those people so much.
Did you work
um,
with Leonard? Because I know he did, like, a Soren, I think, for Tokyo.
I did work with Leonard, but I didn't work with Leonard until after. Um, so the way that I started out at Imagineering is that I started out with like a gosh, I want to say it was like a 6 week contract.
Mm. Did they find you or you found them?
Kind of both. Like as I was
Mm.
leaving DreamWorks, a buddy of mine at DreamWorks said that a friend of his at Imagineering had reached out to him saying, that they were looking for somebody who does what I do,
Yeah.
some concept modeling stuff and all that,
Yeah.
and he's like, "Are you interested in that? It could be good for you. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
So I got connected. Um, and it was awesome. I started out most of my job there was involved with kind of like designing and building the Peter Pan ride for the
Okay.
Disneyland Tokyo expansion. And I made the pirate ship that's out in the bay. I
Oh,
did,
nice.
there's so many cool things I got to do for that. But then as I started, I worked so hard there, and
Yeah.
I feel like I did some of my best work, certainly to that point. Um, but as I started, progressing in my role there with the Tokyo team, um, other projects started taking notice, and that's where I started moving over into how like I they gave me a second computer, a second office, if you will, so that
Hmm.
I could
Hmm.
have an office in both buildings where I was
Oh,
primarily
wow.
working, and that's where I started to meet and work with Leonard more,
Uh-huh. Got
um,
it.
and that
So just
was
so
so
I want to ask
cool.
some technical questions about with, like, Imagineering. So let's say for the Peter Pan ride, right? So the pirate ship. So what's kind of the process? Is it being done digitally and then they're fabricating it with 3D printing, or are you actually working on physical props?
It's so cool. Okay, so it's so cool. Okay, you're like like you're talking about. Like this is super exciting.
Yeah, no,
Themed entertainment is so much fun.
yeah. To me, actually, one of the first episodes I recorded was with a guy named Aiden Hines. We blank for a second there, and he's a sculptor. He does foam sculptures. So he makes these like
Yeah.
styrofoam sculptures, these like 20, 30-foot sculptures, and then fiberglass. And so he did a lot of work for theme parks. He's in the UK, did a lot of work for theme parks in the UK. Really, and this is my, what I love the most. So this is like, you're speaking my language.
That's super cool. Yeah, it's really fun. So essentially, it would start off one of two ways. Either it would start out digitally, and then it would be 3D printed or milled out of foam, and then set up in a physical space, where they would go through and they would hand sculpt the foam to make sure that we're getting some stronger primary forms.
Yeah.
They would 3D scan those pieces and put it back into digital form, and then I would
Wow.
go through and clean that up, push that further, and then they'd go ahead and they make it bigger, and then it's called pointing it up, right? So they go through, they point it up, they sculpt in those details, they refine things, they add forms, they add secondary forms, they 3D scan it, put it back in the computer. I go through, do my thing, make it big.
Wow.
They mill it, they make it way big, and then eventually it becomes
Oh, interesting. So it's not
so
like a
crazy.
it's not like a one it's not like a 1 to 2. There's like multiple steps between, kind of. Wow, interesting.
Yeah, I think there were like maybe 3 passes back and forth. I think they would start
Wow.
out at like 1/67th scale or something like that. Maybe smaller. I can't remember for sure. And then they go to like 1/32nd scale, and then they go to like like 1/3 scale maybe is like the largest we would get before actually that would get hand sculpted more on the foam, and then that would get like super blown up to be the actual size of what gets put in the parks.
What's the advantage to doing that kind of like, starting at the small scale and then bigger? What's kind of the advantage to doing it that way?
It's just polish. So you think about it the same sort of way as if you do any other kind of 3D work. You start out with your main primary forms, you just refine over time. This is it is a workflow thing. You could do this all digitally, right? And just do like the model full scale and work, and you get all your little secondary forms, your tertiary
Right.
forms, all your little nitty gritty details, and then just have that straight up milled. But a lot of that particular pipeline of what we were doing when I was at Imagineering had to do with how things were traditionally done at Imagineering. Because traditionally it was all done in foam, like just like a scale model, and then it would be just kind of like mapping things out in scale form before it was done in full form.
Yeah.
With the introduction of 3D scanning, it allows them to actually go through and put that artist's handiwork into the final product by scaling things up and moving things along in that way. So it's kind of like just like any other sketch. You start out, you block things in, and you kind of refine things out, but it's just
Interesting.
just a much more involved
Right,
sort
right.
of process.
How much creative freedom do you have? Because obviously, let's say with Peter Pan, right? You're dealing with very iconic IPs that you want it to be exactly as exact as possible. And sometimes there I'm sure there is a little more room for creativity, because let's say if you're modeling something that doesn't necessarily exist on screen, maybe it's that. But how's that kind of work in terms of like having your own creative vision versus having to keep it exactly as accurate as possible?
I think it comes down to kind of like what definition of creative freedom you have to put on it, because I wasn't able to go through and like redesign Peter Pan in my image,
Right. Right.
because that would be just horrendously bad.
It'd be
People
fun to see
wouldn't
Peter
like
Pan
that.
with your face on it.
Yes. Yeah, he would not look very good with facial hair right now.
Kind of ruins the
No,
whole, kid forever vibe.
it forever. Yeah. So it's, I think, for that particular role, those particular ideas, I think it has a lot to do with not necessarily making things look the way I want to, but there were different. You still have to problem solve in a creative way.
Mm,
It's like a big thing that we have to consider with themed entertainment is the ride vehicle or the visitor experience when they're
yeah.
going through that experience. We need to make sure that there are certain tolerances that are met, that there are certain like the gap between the ride vehicle and the ride environment itself,
Hmm.
that's significant enough so that we don't bump into things
Right.
or that people don't bump into things. Um, Got to make sure that holes are a certain size so that people don't get stuck in them or
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know
Well, this guy was telling me, Aiden was telling me that he worked on like it was a river ride for this park in the UK, and it was at one point you ride through this like dragon's mouth, and he's saying how they had to make it a certain size because people might get claustrophobic, and you had to take these things into account, and like all these things that you don't necessarily think about, especially as somebody kind of going through, you know, you don't necessarily think about what goes into making these attractions, but the amount of thought, especially with Disney, I mean, like he's that's notorious for every single detail being thought out.
Yep.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's really fascinating. Like I remember I went a few years, this is a little while back. I went with a friend of mine to Disney in Florida, and like we were on Pirates,
Cool.
and the two of us were on the ride, and it was interesting, like the difference in experience that the two of us were having. Because like, I could see he was like totally in it. He was like like really like amazed by the whole experience, and I was like studying every single thing that was going on, like trying to figure out like how they did everything and every kind of trick to kind of make the illusions. Because to me, that's almost more exciting than like the experience. Like because it's so cool. It's for me, again. This is my personal opinion, but I think it's more exciting and more enjoyable than a video game or a movie, or because you're in it. It's so cool. It's really you know. So what are some other things you worked on when you were there instead of besides for Peter Pan?
Well, so Peter Pan was my main one. I also did stuff for the Frozen ride. I did stuff for the Rapunzel, the Tangled ride.
Oh, cool.
Like I said, I did the pirate ship in the harbor. I mean, okay, so to be able to clarify, I didn't do like the entire pirate ship. I did the pirate ship, like the whole hull,
Uh
like
huh.
the art side of it. But the architecture side of it is something that somebody else took care of.
Right. Right. Yeah. I'm sure they have to get
Um,
engineers and
yeah,
all
yeah,
that fun stuff, all the
yeah.
math.
Yeah, all the fun stuff, right? They left me out on that part. They knew I couldn't handle it. I get too excited. Um,
How long were you with
um,
them for?
I was there for 18 months, so it wasn't super long,
Mm.
and it would have gone on longer, but that's when the pandemic hit.
Mm.
Um, and unfortunately, when I was there, I was not like a full staff employee. I was a
Yeah.
contractor.
Yeah.
Um, and they would have kept me, like I had other people coming to me like saying, hey, we got this other ride that we want you to come and sculpt out for us. I want you to do this, that, and the other. And because of the pandemic, I was it affected the Asia parks way
Yeah.
before it affected anything else.
Yeah.
And so that's where all my projects were.
Uh huh.
And any of those projects that I was slated to go on to, they ended up being pushed onto staff employees
Uh huh.
rather than contractors. So
Yeah.
so that's kind of what happened there, and that was such a bummer. I was so disappointed.
Yeah.
I'm still disappointed to some extent. I really love the team. The people there were just phenomenal, and just a really good experience.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm curious, before we kind of go to the next stages, I just wanted to kind of ask a question because you've kind of jumped around. It sounds like a lot in different different disciplines. Let's just say So how do you feel that your like style has changed through the years and kind of through shifting different different disciplines and different companies and games and Crate and Barrel and Disney. These are all there's a lot of similarities, I'm sure, because it's all, all the same basic principles of 3D modeling, but I'm sure it also must have affected your kind of approach and style to modeling.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like like I was talking about with the crate and barrel experience. Like it allowed me to I guess get form a more structured modeling uh, practice. There were different skills and techniques that I worked on there that I don't necessarily care to go into everywhere else. But I mean, like different things. I guess they become tools in your tool belt. They become another. I don't even know what to say about it. I mean, it's like it's one of those
Yeah.
things that it's seasoning in the pot, right?
Right.
You're making a delicious meal and you're
Right.
throwing in spices and it's like everything becomes extra spice. It becomes well, not
Right.
extra spice. It becomes the right spice for your
Right.
meal.
Right. And it helps you kind of become the artist that you ultimately are. When you
Yeah,
kind of look back, you kind of every experience helps to facilitate, you know,
your
their learning
development. Yeah,
experiences. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I hear that makes sense. So then, at that point, after Imagineering, is that when you went to Blizzard?
No. Let me see. After Imagineering, I mean, while I was at Imagineering, I had started teaching at Noman,
Oh,
and
cool.
I've been teaching there since 2019. It's
Nice.
been a while.
So this is a kind of you revisiting the teaching that you started at the beginning. You kind of have circled back.
Yeah, and I had taught at a few other places, a couple of places in Vancouver, Canada. Yeah, I taught at a couple of places online while I
Hmm.
was yeah, all the meanwhile, between those jobs. Um, which that was weird. I don't like teaching online as much as I like teaching in person. I feel like it's easier
Yeah,
to interact with people,
for
f-
sure.
but whatever.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so I was teaching, and it was about a year from the time that I wrapped up at DreamWorks and that I started at my new job at Netflix is where I went
Mm.
to next.
Hmm.
And I actually got that job because I was teaching.
Oh, cool.
So my art director, Drew Hartel, love Drew. He's one of my absolute favorite people. He's so cool. Um, he took my class,
Nice.
and
Was this
partway through
before or
the
after he was your art director?
before
Uh,
before he was just a dude working at Netflix is all I knew.
that's funny.
But he approaches me and he's like, "Hey Steven, you want to come work with me at Netflix?"
Nice.
I was like, "I'm not doing anything. Sure." Yeah. No, it was
Oh,
it was a
cool.
really exciting experience. I started off getting to work. It was just he and I for the longest
Hmm.
time. We did a lot of sculpting just to be able to visualize different elements of the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory story. Um, they were working on kind of rewriting it, giving it a new spin,
Hmm.
and it was a lot of fun. I worked with a lot of different Peter DeSev sketches, designs. So that was cool to get to work on Peter DeSev
Yeah,
things.
that's really cool.
So that's another thing that was just kind of like pushing my style. It was the different
Yeah,
experience, kind of figuring out different sketchy things
yeah,
or
yeah,
proportion things.
yeah.
Um,
So let me just
uh,
ask you, like, just with all this experience, just to diverge for a second, what to you like makes good design? Like, what are some principles that make a good design?
um, well, usually it's better if I don't make it. No, I'm just kidding. No, so good design. Like I love diving into. Sorry, I keep like moving like in and
No,
out.
it's fine. It's
Just like
fine.
whatever.
Get comfortable.
Um, yeah, I move around a lot because like I can't get comfortable. Um, so good design. Like for me, I love it when design is expressive through things like shape and proportions. When there are different contrasting elements, so like some straights versus curves, um, large versus small, those sorts of things. I feel like very, very basic little elements that go into making something feel appealing, and they could be different depending on the thing. You can see behind me, like I've got this character here that she's much more naturalistic, very stylized kind of face, but very,
Hmm.
very more naturalistic in her proportions.
Yeah.
But then I have other characters where it's like I super push the proportions, like really long legs
Right.
and big hands and super small, like big eyes, though.
Yeah.
Like trying to push these different elements. And I think that there are bounds where things can kind of live within that make it so that it's still comfortable and make it so that it's still, well, one, recognizable, but two, relatable. Um, but I think that I think that element of risk and wanting to go through and kind of push things beyond the normal that kind of help it to feel a little bit more fun and adventurous. Um, and then just I don't know. I think it's a lot of that kind of trying to push beyond what's normal.
Yeah.
But then really playing with those shapes and trying to say something with the shapes. Not making something round just because you want to make it round, but really considering what the choice is saying about the design. Is the
Hmm.
character friendly? Is it dangerous? Is it I don't know. Like think
Yeah.
about what
Yeah.
this
But
character
but the
is and what they
story
do.
behind the character.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So what's some like
Precisely.
advice you'd give to like somebody, a beginner who's starting out, trying to kind of find their style, find their voice, if you will? What's kind of some advice to encapsulate that, how you approach things to how somebody else can apply that to their approach?
I mean, like I was talking at the beginning, I really like the idea of learning from other artists through emulation.
Mm,
One of my favorite exercises when I was in school is I would grab some artwork from a very specific artist. Like I mentioned, J. Scott Campbell or Chris
yeah,
Sanders. Pick an artist that you admire and that you love their style, and do you don't copy exactly what they did, but do
right,
something in their style.
yeah.
So one of the things that I did, and I actually have it on the shelf back behind me, but it's a picture that I drew of my wife. But I did this picture of my wife in J. Scott Campbell's style.
Oh,
So it's
cool.
something that I did to be able to kind of learn a little bit from his aesthetic and
Hmm.
his design sense. I've done a whole bunch of things in like Chris Sanders, Mike Mignola, a whole bunch of other people that have very different, distinct design aesthetics.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I tried to marry that into something new so that I could learn from it.
yeah. So let me just ask, because just something to touch on, you mentioned, how do you kind of strike the balance, if you will, between emulating without copying?
And I think that's a great question. Sorry, there we go. Um, I think that emulating without copying comes down to content. So um, I think one of the really I feel like I want to be really clear about this. This is something that's very different from, say, like AI. We see AI, how it goes through and it scraps a whole bunch of people's stuff and makes something new out of sampled elements.
Right.
Um, I feel like it's a similar idea where it's like you're going through and say, I want to do a self portrait in I don't know, in like a Charlie Brown style or
Hmm.
something like that.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
going to go through and I'm going to look at Charlie Brown and the whole Peanuts gang as reference and figure out what makes Snyder look like Snyder, what makes Linus look like Linus, and
Yeah.
like what are those defining features that make these characters who they are, and then I want to figure out how to make myself look like that. I'd have my backwards ball
Right.
cap and a hoodie. I might have my my
Right.
my facial hair, but I'd have to think about like the shape language and how to make that fit because I think there's a really strong simplicity in those characters. So it's like it's learning from the elements of what makes those artists unique and
Mm-hmm.
then being able to learn from that and follow those techniques to create something new and different. Um, we see that sort of thing all over the place. There are a few artists out there that have very similar styles. Forgive me, I can't think of any off the top of my head.
No, you're fine.
but but it's one of those things where, especially in the art world, certain artists are going to have the jobs that they have because of the style that they have. Their style is their
Mm-hmm.
voice. And
Mm-hmm.
so the more you can learn from those people who have become successful through their voice, through their style, through their aesthetic,
Yeah.
um, I think the more you'll be able to make choices to develop yourself and develop your own aesthetic, your own voice. Uh, so yeah, I think that's.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
It's
don't know if
interesting.
I
Like,
completely answered the question, but I think
yeah,
that's kind of a.
yeah, yeah. Like I've noticed a lot. You see a lot of people who have kind of on the opposite end. Not to be offensive to anybody, but like I some people who don't necessarily haven't yet developed their own style. Let's put it that way. And a lot of them kind of follow and for good reason, because they have a good teacher. But like the Shane Olson method, right? You have a lot of people who kind of have learned from Shane and they kind of emulate his style and and it's great. He has a really good style. I love his style. But yeah, it's like it's his style, And so I think people kind of have to, like you're saying, people have to kind of figure out how to take inspiration from that, but then find their own style and kind of. And it's something I think it takes years. I think of practice and kind of figuring out what's unique about you. But I think it's like you're saying, it's one of the most important things about really being a good artist.
Yeah.
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 Very cool. So back to your career a little bit. So two things I want to hit on, because obviously Blizzard's a big one. Also, I really want to talk to you about, I've been following you on Instagram, and you mentioned you launched this new collectible art toy line. I also really want to talk about that. So we talk about that, and then we'll circle back.
Yeah, what do you want to know?
I want to hear about it. I want to hear all about it. First of all, for me, like I love 3D printing. It's like I'm big into 3D printing. So I saw that you were getting into already for a while. You've been kind of getting into it. I saw you started with the masks. I know you're doing that for a little while, and then I saw it was fairly recently that you launched this whole art toy. What do you call it? The desk buddies? Is that what you call it?
Yeah, desk pets.
Desk
I'm gonna
pets.
try to like bring my desk up so that I can reach them.
Yeah.
I've got
Okay,
my
that's cool.
prototypes up
Okay,
here.
awesome.
I can pull them down and I can kind of like show some things off. They're really fun.
So I want to hear like the whole like process about it, because first of all, I love 3D printing, and then I'm a big toy guy. I have a lot of toys, and it's kind of like the industry I'm working in. So I'm really fascinated by like art toys, because I read somewhere recently like this statistic that was in 2023 or 2024 was the first year that adults 18 plus surpassed children in buying toys. So it's like, so obviously there's like the big, like the Funkos and the big like kind of mainstream ones that everyone knows about. But then there's also a lot of these like more niche art toys that a lot of people are collecting now, and like some of them that are out there are just really cool and like really unique and a lot of fun, and like it's just something awesome about like having a little collectible on your desk and whatever. So you kind of like walk through like your whole how you first of all how you came up with the idea, and then how you kind of executed on it.
Well, so for me, I really like I really like toys. I obviously
Yeah.
I keep some things over on the shelf behind me. I've got like a shelf here above my desk. Keep some of my favorite books and things like that up there too. But it's all just about fun and then kind of enriching your
Yeah.
environment and keeping something that's inspiring and fun, and kind of boost your energy a little bit. Having something that's just
For sure.
nice to see, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So for me, like with my toys, you see this
Nice.
this is a prototype of.
So is
it's
that
like,
how big they actually are, or they're smaller?
yeah. This is the factory prototype. So
Oh, nice.
it's like
In the pictures, I thought they were like
camera's,
much smaller.
Not
But that's
focusing.
yeah.
That's
See,
interesting. I
I
wonder
could
if
also
I can.
superimpose an image on top if you want. I get a clear.
Yeah, that could work.
Yeah.
Technology.
Yeah. Right.
Here, I'll zoom in a little bit. There we go.
Oh wow.
Yeah, zoom in on that. Yeah,
Imagineering
right there.
style.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is obviously, big 3D print. Yeah, I went through and 3D
Yeah,
printed them and then painted them and, had some
that's
fun.
awesome.
Um,
Did you print that yourself, or you did that like you outsourced
yeah.
that?
Yeah, I printed it myself and printed it in like 16 pieces
I
and
was gonna say that's not a one piece, is it?
no. No, that'd be pretty cool if I could do it in one piece, but no, 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 no. They do
Is
make
that,
printers that big.
yeah, one guy who I've been in touch with, hoping to get him on. It's this guy. He's the CEO of a company called Figure Plant, and it's this company that does like art installations for companies. So like let's say at a mall, like let's say Adidas has kind of thing like for a new shoe. They do that kind of thing.
That's cool.
Yeah, and so they have one of these like supersized 3D printers, and one of their projects was they 3D printed the grill of like an 18-wheeler truck. So it's really cool. So they're definitely out there,
Yeah.
but a little hard to get your hands on.
Yeah, yeah, pretty cool. It's groovy. I love it. It's
Yeah,
so much
yeah.
fun. But yeah, so I like a lot of what I wanted is just kind of have like just little toys that I really enjoy looking at on my
Yeah.
desk or like in my office in my workspace. I have some stuff that 3D printed at work. Obviously, I've got some bigger 3D prints back here. My
Yeah,
mermaid is one that I've had as like a display piece, and people at work really like that one.
yeah.
But everybody thinks it's a Chris Sanders design. It's actually designed by my friend Micah Schneider, who she's in Germany.
Cool.
It's kind of fun. Anyway,
That's awesome.
different, not Chris Sanders, but everybody calls it the Chris Sanders mermaid, so it's kind of
That's
funny.
funny.
But yeah, it all kind of started from that, and I made my original shark. He was I'll say a more grown-up version of the shark. The teeth were sharper, the feet, the proportions were a little bit more, I'll say adult. Like
Yeah.
the face to the body proportions were
Yeah.
slightly different, things like that. The angles were sharper, but I wanted to make it so that it was more toy-like. So I kind of gave it the chibi sort of pass,
Yeah.
and it worked really well. I tried to run a Kickstarter to be able to get it through, but I'm terrible with Kickstarters. So as I could tell by the way that I very obviously did not have that go through, but I did go through and self-fund these guys to be able to put them out, and so
Nice.
we'll see.
Nice.
They should be getting here sometime after Lunar New Year. So
Why sharks and fish?
mostly because it was like super popular on my Instagram, and so I was like, oh, people like it. Currently, sharks are a really popular thing anyway. All across the United States. I don't know about elsewhere in the world, but currently there are a bunch of like, shark themed clothing and things like that, accessories out in Target and Walmart, for back to school stuff and all that.
Yeah. So you figured to tap into that market.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and I just kind of liked the sculpt, so it was part that I feel like it's a popular theme. But also just the fact that I wanted it, so who cares?
Right. Yeah, like for me, like I've kind of like played around with the idea. I've toyed with the idea, you might say, of like design toys. But I find like the most challenging part is coming up with something that's really original and really never seen before. Like a lot of people have done, especially if you want to do things that are people oriented. That gets really tricky. Because there's so many that already exist, so to come up with something that's really different and not seen before, is tricky, But it's like when I saw the shark, and also you get like that kind of robot fish that's really cool, like it's really different, it really kind of stands out.
I didn't even pull that one down. Yeah, it's like that was a really fun. I don't have a big print
got
of
a
this one,
box
so
set?
I can't. Yeah, I can't. Yeah, I got boxes for all of them.
Nice.
It's really kind of a cool thing. It's part of the prototype.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean it's really fun. I mean I think that with with designer toys, I think one of the things that was kind of disappointing to me going to something like Designer Con
Hmm.
is that either the toys that I was seeing were very, I'll call it noisy in the design sense, where
Mm.
it's like there's so much sculpting and so much detail to
Yeah.
it, but in like a melted plastic sort of
Yeah.
look,
Yeah.
that it's like it just didn't feel appealing to me.
Yeah.
Or it was like 10,000 versions of the exact same toy.
Right.
And I was like, this is boring.
Right.
This can be done so much better. And so,
Right.
and so
Right.
that's where I set to kind of wanting to be able to make my own toys. Being able to make
Yeah.
something that's unique and different, something that's simple and clean, but also something that just has like its own aesthetic. Its own.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's what at least for me, and I think a lot of people would agree, is what makes really great collectibles are the ones that are simple. That's why like Funko is so successful because they're clean, they're simple, and also they're recognizable. That's also a really important part. I've kind of like I've tried to study the whole collectible like the psychology almost behind it, and it's because let's say Funko, right? There are certain Funkos that go for like tens of thousands of dollars on the secondhand market, right? Because essentially they basically create a culture around the product, right? And then once you kind of have that culture, you create variations that are super exclusive, and then so you have people who want it, and people and there's like 10 of them, so all of a sudden they're reselling for $20,000, but it's it's kind of a one in a million type of thing. Like there's only room for one Funko in the market. That's unfortunately the truth. And so no, I really do enjoy the collectible space because I think they're really fun, and especially when you have a cute design and it's fun and again it's simple and clean. Like that just it captures a certain joy that I think few things do.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I think it's absolutely true.
that's really cool. And I've been following, and I really like the project. I really wanted to ask you about it because it's really cool, and I'd love to see it on shelves. Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, yeah. That is, it's I'm currently working on a project right now with Yariv and Steven Silver, trying to do like a little collectibles thing. So we'll see
Very
kind of
cool.
what comes of that. Yeah, but it's a really cool space. Like, and that's for me it's funny. Like I said, the dream is like theme park design, but it has a lot of challenges. So I felt like toys is almost like the next best thing. It's kind of scratches that itch, but like I could do it a little bit more a smaller scale.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, kind of talking about for people who are listening, what's some advice you could kind of give to people who are looking to break into whether it's the animation space or the game space. You're kind of a jack of all trades in some ways. But let's say games, because I think I would say it seems to be your specialty. Correct me if I'm wrong, but or character design. Let's say character design for games. What's some advice that you can give to people who are looking to break into that space and either at the beginning of their careers or just looking to start their career? What's kind of obviously everyone has their own journey, but you could kind of if you could give some sort of blueprint almost, that people can maybe not follow exactly, but kind of have a structure, a scaffolding they could work based off of.
Right. So, um, so for instance, right now my job isn't necessarily character design for games.
Hmm.
I am a character supervisor, but it's all about the creation and like the modeling and the texturing
Hmm.
side of the getting the character into the game. Um, but if just because that's the question that was asked, I do have a good answer.
Hmm.
And I feel like it's going to be a similar answer to really anything you think about. You want to make sure that your portfolio can show how you fit into a pipeline.
Interesting.
So for instance, with character design, you want to show that you can adequately explore the theme, adequately explore the concept, the character. Um, if I have, I got a lot of characters back there. I'm trying to see if I got one more over here. Not one that I can really reach. um, I guess no, I'll leave it up there. Um, when I'm trying to think about a character design and exploring that character properly, I want to make sure that I understand how this character would emote. I want to know about their personality. I want to know that the person did adequate footwork in in kind of developing this, and that could involve everything from like exploration sketches to see the progression of where it started to where it arrived.
Mm.
It could be story beats, trying to figure out like, okay, this character's ordering a cup of coffee, or they're enjoying a slice of pizza, or like whatever it is that's happening in their world.
Mm.
Maybe they just got fired, and how would they respond to that?
Mm. Mm. Interesting.
Different little story beats, and trying to figure out like who this character really is and how they fit into their world. I think that those sorts of things are going to be really key. Facial exploration, hands, just different acting drawings and designs.
Yeah.
Not everything has to be a super rendered out painting, but definitely having adequate exploration of the character and who they are. I think that definitely is super, super necessary.
Interesting.
Um,
So in that same vein, like, what are some skills that you think people should focus on and work on developing and honing?
Consistency. So a lot of that'll be just mileage, right? Like, if you want to draw an apple, or you want to draw the same apple, want the apple to look the same the exact same
Yeah.
time, or if you want to do a turntable of an apple, um, that's something actually that's really cool. So there's an artist that I follow who's amazing. He does super awesome work. He does very stylized designs. I love his work. His name, Tanner. I think his name is
Hmm.
Tanner. He goes his handle on Instagram is something like TM Wilson.
Hmm.
Amazing. He's super good. But one of the things that he does regularly is he'll do these animated turntables, hand drawn
Mm.
turntables of characters,
Interesting.
and beautiful, immaculate work. And I think that being able to understand what your character looks like from all different angles, I think that that's going to be really good. One of the more entry level jobs that I think a lot of people will get going into character design would be doing turns of a character. So being able to
Yeah.
draw the character from the front, from the three-quarter, from the side, from the back. Um, Being able to do close up turns of the head, those sorts of things, and being able to have that read consistently from drawing to drawing, so that you know that like this is that character and this is exactly what they would look like from that side, or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, I feel like that's really really key to kind of work out. If I'm looking at that from kind of like a 3D modeling standpoint, or like a 3D world side of things, I'm looking at more of like does this person, because like with 3D what's nice is that you can take your model and you can spin it and you can see
Right.
it from all sorts of different sides, right?
Right.
It's like if I'm looking at somebody's 3D model, you have to think about that thing in 3D space. So are they thinking about how the shapes relate from the front to the side? Are they thinking about how anatomy comes into play? And with a very stylized character, I mean, obviously I do like like a huge range and like very stylized shapes and proportions and things like that. But
Yeah.
even at that, I'm still trying to think about the relationships of the different parts of the anatomy, and the way that the skull would fit into the head. I might not necessarily be thinking about like, oh, here's the orbital ridge here, and
Right.
everything's looking great, and oh, cool,
Right.
this is
Right.
going to be cartilage right here. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, but I am thinking about like how anatomy fits in to the context of my design,
Yeah.
um, and trying to think about like you know fleshy parts versus bony parts, and how those
Right.
shapes could vary based on those sorts of elements.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of cool stuff like that. But I'm always trying to think about really the basics, and really forming a huge sturdy foundation on those basics, because everything else is just gravy.
Right.
Um,
Right. You said before the spices. If you have spices
the
but not good
spices.
food, spoiled meat with a good spices is not gonna taste very good.
Or even if you forget the meat, I mean, it's like the
Yeah.
stew's not going to be the same, you know.
Right. No, for sure, for sure.
I can't handle a vegan stew. I'm sorry, for anybody listening out there.
They might, I don't know if they'll let you get away with that. Yeah. Where do you see kind of the industry heading in the next few years? And I think we're kind of in like a very transitional period. It feels like. Again, like I'm not so much in the game space, but I hear a lot of people seem very jaded in the game space. It's kind of what the vibe I've been getting, and it's a lot of things. It's kind of a whole. There are all the mass layoffs, and there's the whole AI, and there's a lot of components to it. But I'm curious to hear from your perspective. Like, where do you think things are gonna kind of go in the next 3 to 5 years?
So I think there are a lot of things happening right now, and it's very easy to understand how people could feel dated, jaded, how people could feel jaded with everything that is going on because of AI and layoffs and things like that. Even with like corporate mergings, you think about like even within Blizzard, we had 1,900 people laid off. With an additional set round of people laid off later that year.
Yeah.
It's like it's something that's very hard for us to it's a very it was heavy.
Yeah.
It's still heavy for us to think about it because we lost people that we very heavily relied on, people that we loved, people that we miss very dearly because they were a huge integral part of our team. God, it was so hard. But I think so. So there are those things that happen, and so we recognize that it's because, in a large part, because of the way that large companies have come in to combine, a lot of things that happen when those sorts of things happen, when there are mergings like that. It's like they one thing they do is they eliminate redundancies. So if they have like a social media team, they'll try to condense it down to not have too many people doing too many, I don't know, whatever.
Right.
They condense things down in whatever ways they need to.
Yeah.
But then one of the other things that they'll do is that they'll kind of redirect the efforts of the company to be able to meet other overarching goals and whatnot for the company. So there's a whole side of the game that we don't necessarily see, and we don't have any clue actually as to what's happening because there's very limited information that they give us.
Right.
And it's really hard from that standpoint. So because of all those layoffs, it makes people feel a little bit anxious, makes people feel a little bit it's harder to trust exactly what's going on sometimes.
Yeah.
It gets really hard. But oh gosh, where was I think I might have lost track of the question. So
that's kind of where do you see the industry heading over the next few years, kind of with everything, with all the shakeups kind of that we're currently experiencing?
Right. Perfect. Thank you. You're the best.
No
problem. So I think personally, a lot of what we're seeing is we are seeing people laid off in mass, which is hard. But we are also seeing the emergence of new indie studios. Studios like Player First Games, a whole bunch of others too. Gosh, that are making really killer games. And I think that's. I feel like we'll continue to see some more of that. A lot of kind of the way that AI has kind of affected things lately. It seems to be more in the realm of like mobile games. Mobile games will often go through and use it to be able to generate imagery that then they go through and animate for the game, which is really bizarre.
It shows, like the final product suffers because of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's like it a lot of things lose that personal touch. It still
Right,
makes money. It still does
right,
what it needs to do because they were able to really cut costs in the front end, and so everything else is just profit.
right. Yeah. Well, I was
I
having the same conversation with somebody earlier today, who's an environment artist in the game industry, and he was saying a very similar thing. He was saying that I think his thought was that we're going to see more kind of double A studios coming out that maybe aren't as profitable, but the projects that they're putting out have a lot more heart and soul behind them because they're being done by people who really love what they're doing and are doing it for the love of the craft. Versus some of the bigger established studios, where obviously the artists doing it are doing it for the love of the craft, but there's also the whole corporate side of things that is looking to maximize the profits, and which again, it's not to take away because obviously these games are tremendously expensive to develop. Like the example we were talking about was like GTA, the new GTA is coming out, and we were talking about this idea how I saw an article recently they want to charge $100 for the new GTA game, and kind of that's kind of how it kind of triggered the discussion. Um, which I mean, because the games have been like $60 for a while now. So and like I understand from the corporate side of things. These are very expensive games, and you kind of want to get a return on investment that's worth it. But at the same time, it then sucks a little bit of the life out of it in some ways. And so it'll be interesting to see how things kind of play out, and also I think even not just in the video game space, in the movies, TV shows, that whole space, I think there's a lot more indie studios that have a chance now because of all the streaming, because of the saturation, of how many options there are out there. I think you see more and more small projects being put out again with a lot of heart and soul that maybe are low budget, but then end up being really successful. Like what was it? Everything Everywhere All at Once is a great example of that.
Yeah.
There are a lot of these examples where they're not the same big budget movies, but again, the people who are making them are really putting their all into it. Because like this is their shot. And
Yeah.
because of that, you end up with products that that the love for the craft really shines through.
Yeah, I think there's a possibility of all. I mean, there's certainly like, I think, I think one of the tricky things about being an artist in the entertainment industry is that you're there because you have passion for it,
Right.
right? Um, so that's good and bad, right? Because there's always going to be something to create. There's always going to be something to make and to I don't know. It's just life is cool like that, right? Like we
Yeah.
we we get to make stuff because we're creative, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think there's also the other side of things where it's like there are people who are willing to take advantage of it.
Right. Right.
Um, and I think for me, my perspective, it becomes um like I don't like living in like pessimistic
Yeah.
landia, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to make sure that as I'm moving forward, as I'm working, as I'm developing myself, that I'm working on trying to better my craft, but also plan ahead in certain ways. I have no idea where this industry is going.
Yeah.
Very clearly, very honestly, I have no idea where it's going. I don't enjoy some of the things that are happening. I think that my personal philosophy is that like we the artists, we the creatives, I'll say creatives because that also lumps in more like the technical people who are enabling the artists to
Yeah.
create and do things. I feel like there's way too much money going into not the product, not the people making the product, you know? Yeah, I'm trying to like be vague but also specific.
Yeah.
But like
Don't get in any trouble here.
yeah. So it's like I don't wanna go on like a big rant because there
Yeah.
are a lot of things that are happening on a corporate level.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking specifically about Blizzard. I feel like Blizzard is quite good and they're trying to do their best to be able to enable their people, take care of people. Um, it's not perfect, and there are definitely people who are very much more aware of what's going on there than I am. Um, but places like Disney, places like
Yeah.
where the corporation rules supreme,
Right.
and the artists
It's,
don't
it's
get.
corporation first, art second,
Uh-huh.
which is really unfortunate because again, just to pick on Disney since you brought it up, like it's really a shame because it's saying because like here and again and not even to get into like the not even to get into the weeds of like and to try and hate on them, but like here you look at the story of Walt Disney. Here's a person who started this company with such a devotion and such a love for the craft, and and sacrificed like a tremendous amount, and really went against the grain to start this company and to do things so differently than what was being done. And I think it's inevitable that as these companies grow and they kind of become this this mega corporation where you can't keep that spirit to it. It's not possible when you have that many people, and it's not unique to art. I think it goes across the board to any industry. Whenever you have whatever it is, let's say a guy who's passionate about plumbing, right? As in, so he's a plumber because he loves pipes or whatever, and then
Mario.
exactly that's what I was gonna say. And then and then he built up his business, and all of a sudden now he has and he dies, and the company keeps growing, and all of a sudden it's 10,000 employees, right? All of a sudden, like the initial love for pipes that was there, it can't translate to such a large scale, which it's unfortunate, and obviously there's both have their place, as in you need the mega corporations, but then that also as those corporations grow into mega corporations, it kind of makes space for the the indie studios to kind of come up and find their space and to kind of catch the people who don't want the mega corporations, which so again, not to hate on it too much, but just there's a place for both of them, I think. But no, it's a little sad to see, like, especially like when you see a studio that like you've followed and loved for a long time and see them kind of morph from one into the other. I think it can be a little disheartening, but it's the way of the world, I guess.
Disney is such a huge experience, a huge example of everything because
Yeah.
I mean, everywhere you go in the world, there's going to be a huge, I'll say a Disney cult following.
Right. For sure.
Like
For
it's,
sure.
I think the Disney company has done a good job traditionally of working its way into the hearts of millions around the world.
Yeah.
I'll even say billions,
Yeah.
because we've got that many. We've got a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that's crazy, I mean, it's like they're in this industry, it's really hard. And when I talk about trying to stand up for yourself, this is one of the things that I super, super mean. When you get into a job, you want to think about how much money it costs for you to live. If you're getting an offer that's less than what it costs for you to live, then that's not a good offer.
Right. Right.
So like one of the things that they'll do a lot in the industry is that they're trying to boost their profits. They're trying to keep their margins as big as possible, right?
Right.
And one of the things that drives me nuts, one of the things that's really hard, is seeing, like with Walt Disney. I mean, Disney sold his car like to be able to
Right.
afford things. Like he
Right.
he,
Right.
he he bent over backwards to make things work. He worked himself to death. He worked his employees to death too. But that's another that's another
Can
case,
of
another
worms.
thing, another story,
Yeah.
different day, right? But a lot of things that happens now that's really, really hard is that, like, look at Bob Iger, and he was brought back to the company with a
Yeah.
$24 million a year salary. I'm like,
Yeah.
he doesn't deserve to be earning that much money. Nobody does.
Yeah.
And these
Yeah.
these mega corporations getting so much money to like the top 2 or 3 people, and then everybody who's actually making the company successful doesn't get to benefit from the success of the company. There is no profit sharing. There,
Yeah.
like those sorts
Yeah.
of things happen, and it's an absolute nightmare. It's a pain.
Yeah.
So I don't share that. I don't say that to like rise everyone up in arms and grab your your torch and pitchfork. Let's
Right.
go burn a
Right.
witch, right? But we definitely need to be aware of this is what's happening on the top end of a company. We need to make sure that we're standing up for ourselves and think about what it is that you need in order to be happy.
Yeah.
Think about that, because you definitely need to make sure that you're negotiating for yourself and standing up for yourself in those sorts of ways. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So on that note, can you talk about like what your definition of success looks like?
So I think the definition of success. Okay, so for me, it's I would say it's twofold, but I think it might be actually more threefold. Because I mean, and I'll say threefold because I feel like it's going to go both in the personal route of like what's success for you, but then also what's successful for the whole.
Mm,
Um, because if you're not performing well for the team, but you're performing well for yourself, like um, that's not sustainable.
yeah. Yeah.
But on the front for you being successful for yourself, there's the half of it for now, and there's the half of it for later. Um, like I'm not like super well known as a person, as an artist, but I am public, and there are people around the world who know who I am. Um, I don't necessarily define that as being successful. Like even if I had 4 billion followers on Instagram or whatever, I don't really count that as success per se. It's success in the fact of, people know who you are. Okay, great.
Right.
but like for me, I'm a family man. I've got I'm married. I've got a couple kids. Beautiful family. They're great. Love them to death. Um, I have to be able to take care of them.
Right.
My definition of success is like, at the end of the day, am I able to provide for my family? But then it's not just providing for my family, it's also making sure that the future is taken care of. Am I able to save for retirement? Am I able to, um, is there anything financially that I'm actually worried about? Like, am I taking care of
Right.
all those things, right? Um, that are so basic to human life. And so, for me, um, do we have everything we need? Yeah. Yeah. I feel like, I've been successful on that side of things. I feel like I'm very fortunate. I mean, I work 3 jobs. I have my main job as a character supervisor on Overwatch, and then I also have 2 teaching jobs. I teach at a community college here in Southern California, and I also teach at Noman. So it's like, and that and anything else I choose to do on the side, all my toys and etc. Right? It's like,
Right. Right.
you know,
All the personal projects.
the personal projects, the personal things that I got going on. So it's a matter of trying to figure out what you need, and then understanding what you have. Uh, Seeing where the gap is, and then filling that in with whatever you need to be able to, to be able to successfully create that stable foundation. And
Yeah. Yeah. It's really well said. Yeah.
so
And
that
that's
to me
it.
is much more success, I mean, granted, like, being able to do all that and have like a 7 or 8 figure income,
Right.
that'd be stellar.
Right. I wouldn't complain.
Woo.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but
Make it
it's
rain.
yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, at the end of the day, because of the systems that we live in, it's going to be much more difficult to make those sorts of figures happen.
Yeah.
So it's just making sure that your needs are met and that your future is prepared for. And I think that is core baseline success.
Yeah. Really well said. I really appreciate your time. Where can everybody find you online?
Oh, I try to keep myself very hidden. No, nobody will ever see me. No, I go by Smartest online. SMA artist. So 2 ways.
All
Um,
right.
It's a serendipitous combination of my initials and the word artist. So
It's like a match made in heaven.
match made in heaven. Quite smart.
Awesome. Instagram,
Instagram,
ArtStation.
YouTube, Twitch, ArtStation.
Amazing. And is your Kickstarter still around, or you took it down?
Kickstarter's done. It didn't go through, so not really too worried about it. Eventually,
People do want to. If you want to get their hands on one of the little sharks, little Bruce.
yeah,
where could they,
eventually, little Brucey will be coming out. He'll be he's self-funded, so he'll be coming out. Probably selling him on my website and potentially at different conventions until he's gone. There will only be 500 made, so keep that in mind, guys.
I was gonna say, get them while they're hot. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, my friend. And I appreciate the opportunity, and
Yeah, of course.
I'm
Appreciate you coming
honored
on.
to have been asked.
Yeah.